I used to feel that I belonged on the Harlem streets, and that regardless of what I did, nobody had any business to take me off the streets. I remember when I ran away from shelters, places that they sent me to here in the city. I never ran away with the thought in mind of coming home. I always ran away to get back to the streets. I always thought of Harlem as home, but I never thought of Harlem as being in the house. To me, home was the streets. I suppose there were many people who felt that. If home was so miserable, the street was the place to be. I wonder if mine was really so miserable, or if it was that there was so much happening out in the street that it made home seem such a dull and dismal place. You might see somebody get cut or killed. I could go out in that street for an afternoon, and I'd see so much that when I came in the house, I'd be talking and talking for what seemed like hours. Dad would say, "Boy, why don't you stop that lying? You know you didn't see all that. You know you didn't see nobody do that." But I knew I had. Down here is where we used to have all the bottle fights, can fights, gang fights.
It looks like they still got them here.
Yeah, it's always cluttered up with a lot of glass, broken bottles, cans, that sort of thing. In fact, we used to come down here and have gang fights too, you know, with the zip guns and homemade
this
guns.
narrow little place here.
Yeah, but we knew the backyards very well. You know, we could get around in here good. Over here is where I was when I got shot.
You're about 13 then, huh?
Yeah, I was 13. And Turk and I were trying to pull down a sheet off a clothesline by throwing a rock with a rope tied on the end up, pull it down. You know, this was like a lit up alleyway, and that in the back was dark, and it was like having a flashlight on you.
Who shot you? Yeah, you ever find out?
No, he never found out. The guy was in the dark, we couldn't see him, and we were perfect targets and all that light.
Must have been his clothesline you were getting, I guess.
Well, the police tried to find out whether it was the person on the clothesline, but they never could determine it for certain.
They didn't look too hard, probably.
No. Now, over here is where we used to come and draw up the daily itinerary when we played hooky. You know, all the hooky players would gather around down here and decide what we were going to do today. And
true enough, it never came. Yeah. You would have got
the National Educational Television Network presents At Issue, a monthly commentary on people, events, and ideas. This month, At Issue, Inside the Ghetto.
Everybody.
A conversation between Claude Brown, author of the recently published autobiography Manchild in the Promised Land, and Norman Podhoretz, editor of Commentary magazine.
Well, Claude, you know, the first time I read your book, Manchild in the Promised Land, was in Galleys, for it was published. And, of course, we published a section of it in Commentary before the book came out. And I thought then that it was just about the most extraordinary thing I'd ever read about growing up, or as you call it in the book, coming up in Harlem. And since then, since its publication, I understand that Jimmy Baldwin sent a telegram from Turkey saying that he thought it was the only major American autobiography since Richard Wright's Black Boy. And on the other side, just to even up the score a bit, Tom Wolfe had said that this is a book about Harlem and growing up in Harlem. It made Baldwin himself look like a tourist. And I think that's a slightly unjust characterization so far as Baldwin is concerned. But nevertheless, there's no question that this is an extraordinary, remarkable book that breaks new ground in candor and straightness in describing the childhood of a Negro boy in a place like this. How'd you happen to write the book? How'd you come to write it?
Well, the writing and subsequent publication of the book was all a part of a freak accident. In 1960, Descent magazine contacted me. They'd heard about me through a friend, and they requested that I write a piece. Well, I was in my... at the time, they requested I write a piece for their forthcoming summer issue, which didn't come out in 1960, didn't come out until the summer of 61.
Well, that's the way quarterlies are, yeah.
Well, when it came out in the summer of 61, the Descent issue with my piece in it, I was contacted by Collier Books, who at that time was planning a series of paperbacks
Yeah.
My book, which has recently been published in hardcover by Macmillan, was originally intended to be a paperback. And, well, Bram Cavan, who was senior editor at Collier's at the time, talked me into writing a book. We had a big...
You didn't think of yourself as a writer, really?
No, I still don't. I'm not a writer. You know, it was my first book, and it'll be my last
You're a
book.
writer, all right.
No, not really. Well, we won't go into that now. But anyway, Bram convinced me that anything I wrote would be acceptable. So I signed on the dotted line, and they gave me a contract and a $1,500 advance in 3 parts.
Wow. Well, so in a way, you wrote it for money.
Yeah, that's right.
Like Dr. Johnson said, no man but a blockhead ever wrote anything except for money. We're all too high-minded to say that kind of thing nowadays.
Yeah, well, I would never have undertaken to write a book had I not been offered money. But while writing it, I became so involved with what I was doing, and I began to experience the spiritual catharsis, which went along with the writing of the book. And I realized that if I never received a penny for it, the psychological value of writing the book would have made it worth everything, all the pain and torment. You know.
Yeah. Well, tell me something. The book, of course, has received, on the whole, enormously enthusiastic reviews. And a few weeks ago, it was reviewed on the front page of the Sunday Times Book Review. And it's got, in general, got a lot of attention. And it's quite clearly going to not only sell well, but it is a succès d'estime. There have been a couple of criticisms, however, not so much, I think, of its literary quality as of people pointing to what they regard as gaps in the narrative. I was wondering what you thought about those. For example, the idea, several reviewers have said, and this is a criticism with which I tend more or less to agree, that it never becomes clear from the book itself how a kid like you made it out of Harlem. And a kid like you, I guess we ought to explain, being a delinquent at the age of 6, a hooky player, and at some point a dope pusher, thief. You got shot at 13, as we were saying before, got thrown into the Harlem River at some point. You went to the Wiltwick School and then the Warwick Reform School. A thoroughly unpromising beginning from the point of view of most middle-class Americans. And it does seem, I think it will seem to most people who read the book, really extraordinary that you made it out, that you were able to muster the detachment and the spiritual strength, not only to get out, but to write this book in which you could tell the story without affectation, without special pleading, without apology, without defensiveness, in the straight and beautifully refined, as you've done it, language of the streets of Harlem. But critics have now been saying that you never tell us how it happened. Just suddenly you made a decision. And
well, I have to disagree with you there, Norman. You see, I illustrated quite clearly how, or not how, but when I began to pull away from the lure of crime, the lure of Harlem street life, and even why, for that matter. But what people seem to be asking for, the critics who are criticizing the book because I didn't give an explanation. They want some sort of formula, it seems to me, to say, well, look, this is how somebody gets out. This is how one gets away, you know, from the graft of the vices in Harlem, the Harlem streets. And this is something I don't even know. I started at a time, I told them, it's all in the book, just when I decided to get out of Harlem. It's in the book when I got out of Harlem and why I decided to get out of Harlem. Now, anything more than that, I can't give them. I can't give them any formulas for, you know, why one person will get out and people such as this will get out every time. That seems to be what they're asking.
Well, in a way, I think they are asking for that. I myself wouldn't ask for that, but, you know, it works both ways. You see, on the one hand, there are people who want to read your book and say, well, if Claude Brown, who was such a bum to begin with, could make it, then any Negro kid can make it. It takes character, guts, intelligence, and so on, despite the conditions. That's on one side. On the other side, people want to say that the fact that Claude Brown made it is of no significance whatever. It takes a kind of miracle to make it. And the review, for example, in the Herald Tribune a couple weeks ago seemed to me to suggest the reviewer, who was a white radical or liberal, white liberal sympathizer of the more militant wing of the civil rights movement, in a way didn't like the idea that you made it out of there, because he was afraid that this might reassure what he called white America into thinking that anybody can make it out. And he said, well, why isn't Claude Brown conscious of the political, sociological forces that should have made it impossible for him to have written this book in the first place?
But I am conscious of it.
Well, he says that you don't talk about it in the book. What would your answer be to that?
No, you see, many people seem to have wanted and expected and resented the fact that it wasn't there, a sociological dissertation on the Harlem life and the seemingly overwhelming disadvantages of coming up in Harlem. And because I didn't present Harlem from that point of view, they're disappointed. Now, there are many people who are too intellectually endowed and inclined to really perceive the message of the book.
What's the message of the book?
The message of the book is that Harlem has been cast aside as a sort of inhuman community in New York City and in all the large metropolitan areas.
By whom,
by the society at large. And many people, you notice, we've had too much psychological and sociological analysis of these various ghettos throughout the country already. And this is what problematized Harlem and has acted as an obstacle in the way of people actually seeing these people, the people in the Harlems throughout the nation, in their ultimate humanity. You know, even though they may react violently to all the social and political pressures of America, of the society at large today, you know, they're human beings nevertheless. And this is what I wanted to try. I didn't want to add to the obscurity of the Negro by analyzing him some more, become another Clark, another Kenneth Clark, that is, another James Baldwin. We've had too much of this. You know, well, I was trying to absolve the Negro from this from the maze of psychological problems that he's been thrust into and thrown aside. Nobody really looks at the Negro today. You know what they say? They look at the Negro problem. Right. In my book, I'm looking at the Negro personality, the Negro individual, and forget the problem.
Well, one of the things, and I think that's one of the reasons the book is so powerful, because one of the things that it communicates, the only other book I know that communicates anything like this is Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. And even there, he sort of mythologizes or mythicizes Negro experience in places like Harlem. What you get, and I think this is one of the things that will both shock and delight people, what a great time you had coming up in Harlem. You had a ball playing hooky, stealing, even going to Wiltwyck and Warwick. The whole first half of the book is full of joy, exuberance, animal spirits, you know, one can read this. It's a kind of horrible thing to say in light of the problem, you see, but a lot of people are going to read this book and envy you, the fun you had in your childhood. Did that occur to you when you were writing those sections?
Yeah, my childhood delinquent career was a real ball. You know, it was an exciting adventure to me. I was a delinquent not because I was forced to. I was a delinquent because I wanted to be one. You know, all of these things.
Was your idea of being good, as you say in the book somewhere? They can tell you to be good, and this is the way you knew how to be good, was to be good at stealing.
I was enjoying life as I came, and many of the people I came up with were enjoying life also. They were enjoying taking drugs. They were enjoying shooting each other. They were enjoying the gang fights. We all enjoyed it. It was a ball. It gave us a sort of social status, and we enjoyed stealing.
You were making a rep all the time, as you put it, reputation for being tough.
Yeah, this was meaningful to us in life, and it was perhaps the most meaningful experience available to us at the time. But many of the other guys with whom I came up weren't able to perceive it was time to stop playing here and now. You know, if I'd gone to Coxsackie, I would have had a criminal record which would have presented an obstacle in the way of my advancement, economic and social advancement for the rest of my life. And this was the time when I had to make a choice. I had to find a way to avoid going on along the roster of the New York State penal institutions. You know, like I would have gone to Coxsackie, Elmira, Auburn, Dannemora, Sing Sing, and eventually Attica, perhaps. or if I didn't make the electric
worst, by the way?
Yeah, Attica is the top security prison in New York.
So at the age of 16, you just decided that was it. You'd had your sort of childish fun and games, and if you didn't cut it right there, you'd be through for life.
That's right. At 16, the party was over.
Yeah, but what did you didn't have any specific ambitions at 16, though, when you talk about economic and social advance. A lot of people who talk about
I knew I wanted to make money. I wanted to make money, and I didn't want to spend too much time in jail in the process of making this money.
Well, people like Kenneth Clark and others are repeatedly making the point. You see that a 16-year-old kid in Harlem doesn't have that feeling because he's got no sense of possibility. All the avenues are shut off. How come you didn't feel that way? Or maybe they're wrong. Is it untrue?
They are. Kenneth Clark and others. This is one of the reasons why the Harlem community has never really, or has never been validly analyzed, because the people who make all the comments and who become the authorities and experts on Harlem have never lived here.
I think Clark did, didn't he?
No, he might have lived in Lenox Terrace, and that's not Harlem.
Yeah, I see what you mean. But is it not true, nevertheless, that a lot of, say right now, we go out on these streets and there's 16-year-old kids walking around. Do they have any feeling that there are chances for them, that they can make it big in the world?
Well, I didn't have any feeling that there were chances for me, but I knew it was out there somewhere, and I had to get it.
You had to get it,
yeah.
You yourself, by yourself.
That's right.
And it didn't really occur to you that being a Negro was going to, well, obviously occurred to you it was going to make it difficult, but it didn't occur to you to make it impossible as a kid. Did it occur to any of your friends that it was impossible for them?
No, I don't think we thought too much about it. We knew what we wanted, and we were so involved in our problems that we never gave too much thought to the social and economic restraints on us.
Yeah.
All we knew is that we had to get it, and we wanted to get it then and there,
In some way. Well, like all kids.
Yeah.
But, well, what about now? You had no real consciousness of the social and economic restraints on you, though. Obviously, there were social and economic restraints of a very considerable kind, and these restraints are, as we all know, getting even worse on account of things like automation.
We were cognizant of them, but we never, dwelled upon them that much. We were too involved in our own problems. As I said before, we were trying to get a little bit of money here and now, a few $100s, get a new suit and that kind of business, and we didn't have time to go around discussing the sociological problems with the social scientists.
Yeah, well, yeah, but that's a little unfair. I mean, whether you read the social scientists or argued with them or not, still, didn't you have any sense? There's not much of it in the book, but didn't you have any sense that all kinds of possibilities were closed to you? Not only because you were Negro in your case,
I'm
but
telling you, there was a definite and explicit sense, and it's implied all the way through the book. Everything is done but a diagram drawn. You see, the only way I could have made, or I could have emphasized even more the sociological pressures on us would have been to make it a sociological dissertation.
No, which it shouldn't have been. Yeah, but I'm not asking you that.
Remember in the book where I said I'm having a discussion with my hustling tutor, Reno, in the book, and he was telling me, yeah, man, it don't make sense to go down there and work for Goldberg because you ain't gonna get no money. The only way you're gonna get any money out of him is to put a gun to his head and take it. This was an awareness. I mean, like, how much more explicit can you get?
What do you mean by Goldberg? Who's Goldberg?
Goldberg it's argot for the Jewish merchants around town. Yeah.
Was there a lot of bitter feeling toward Goldberg in Harlem? Still is, I guess.
Yeah, and it's not just Goldberg. It's Goldberg is our nearest white proximity here, and it was always. And the Harlem hostility was always unleashed on Goldberg simply because he was there.
He was there. He was the only white man around.
That's right. The Irishmen weren't here. The Italians weren't here. That's why it was Goldberg. But Goldberg symbolized the white world to us.
But that's an interesting question. Were no distinctions made between, for example, the Jewish white man and the white world, or what they call Mr. Charlie down south? You didn't use that phrase here, Charlie.
Oh, I did. It's in the book.
Well, there's that sentence in the book about if he's meaner than he's stingier, he's Charlie, and if he's stingier than he's meaner, he's Goldberg. That was about the feeling.
Yeah.
When you were coming up here, you think that feeling is still prevalent?
Very much so. Even more so now than, and because when I was coming up, this was before the advent of the black Muslims. Yeah, and the black Muslims that sort of brought all of this hostility out into the open and to the foreground.
Yeah.
And they sort of redirected
Well, hostility
it.
generally against whites,
Yeah.
or is it particularly against Jews, would you say?
No, it's generally against whites.
The white devils, blue-eyed devils. Was there never any consciousness at all or any awareness on the part of kids in Harlem about the role of, say, Jewish liberals in civil rights organizations or NAACP or anything like that?
Harlem,
you just didn't know about it?
Let me tell you, in my Harlem, we were almost unaware of the NAACP.
You didn't even know
I never
such
heard
thing
of the
existed.
NAACP
Yeah.
until I was 18.
Yeah.
The NAACP is a Negro middle class organization. They ask any of the people around here how many of them. I'll bet in this square block you couldn't find 2 members of the NAACP.
Right.
And the
You mean in this
NAACP
hip
never
block?
NAACP never come to this area of Harlem's recruiting members.
Yeah.
And they know they don't represent this community.
Yeah. Well,
and
what
they
do
have
you-
no desire to.
Does anybody represent this community? Well, you got a congressman you call in the book. What do you call him? Light, bright, and damn near white.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
obviously
that's our
don't like
congressman.
him.
He's supposed to represent us, but he represents himself.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So that,
Well,
in effect, you would say that nobody really represents the Negro of Harlem, the lower class Negro of Harlem, the kind of people you came up with.
Look.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
Or does somebody?
This has been illustrated just recently in no uncertain terms. In the riot last week
In Los Angeles?
in Los Angeles, there was not
Last month, you mean, yeah.
Last week, yeah, last month.
Right.
There was not one Negro anywhere in the country whom the white power structure could turn to and say, look, go down there and reason with those Negroes, you know, who are running havoc in the streets. And I don't know if it had the effect of showing to the white power structure that the Negro masses were not represented in all of their dealings, negotiations, and signing of bills, because but it should have. It should have shown the white power structure that the Negro masses are not represented and have not been
By the
represented.
Negro power structure.
And the Negro power structure knew this all the time.
Well, is there anybody in the country could have gone to Los Angeles and said to those people, come on,
There
cool
would
it.
have been one man.
Who's that?
Had Sonny Liston regained his title in his last attempt, he would have been the man to send to Los Angeles and reason with the people in the street.
How come?
Because Sonny is sort of like the personification of Negro hostility and embitterness and the brutality, the brute force that the Negro would like to see run up against the power structure and just demolish it. They would have listened to him, but they weren't going to listen to any comedians. They weren't going to listen to any Roy Wilkins, Martin Luther Kings, Whitney Youngs, etc. Only someone with whom they could identify. None of the members of the established Negro leadership can identify themselves with the Negro masses, and none of the members of Negro masses throughout the nation can identify with these people.
You think that's
all the past negotiations while ignoring and neglecting almost totally the Negro masses, the negotiations between the white power structure and the Negro leadership have only served to alienate the Negro leadership from the Negro masses even further.
Well, assuming that that's true, I hope you're exaggerating slightly, but assuming it's true, what can be done about this? I hear tell that you have ambitions about becoming a congressman sometime from this district and unseating Mr. Light, bright, and damn near white. You think that, for example, if you could succeed in getting elected someday after you're going to law school now, of course, and if you were to go into politics and try to unseat Congressman Powell or whoever happened to be around then, you think you could do something to close that gap?
Well, I'm going to try. I'm ready to devote my life to it, and I hope I'm competent enough to be effective.
Well, is it a matter of just your own individual competence? I mean, how come you're going to make a lot of money on this book and so on?
Yeah,
and,
hopefully so.
Hopefully, and what makes you think that the Negro masses won't be alienated from you once you make it big?
Well, I live in Harlem now. I've lived in Harlem all my life. I've never tried to be white. I've never had any desire to be white. And
you think Martin Luther King has a desire to be
I still know
white?
the people on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still speak to them in Argot. There are very few people around here that know me by Claude Brown.
Sonny.
If they went, yeah, you know, it's still Sonny Boy, and that's fine with me, you know. And I know them by, well, whatever their nicknames are. We grew up together. I still feel as though I'm an integral part of the Harlem community.
Yeah, but are they gonna feel that way about you? Even when we were walking down the street just before, and earlier this morning when people were coming up to you for your autograph and making a great fuss over you, and already I noticed, especially with some of the older women who knew you when you were a little kid.
No, these were not the ones who were asked. These were not the ones who were asking me for my autograph.
They didn't know you.
Yeah, they just.
But they were kind of intimidated by you.
By your presence.
My presence?
Yeah, by your
I was just
presence.
hanging back. Why were they intimidated by my presence? Because
Well,
you're white?
no, yeah, you know, like if I'm in the Harlem streets with somebody white, well, already there's the implication of an alienation from the community.
Well, and yeah, exactly, but won't that sort of be a problem to you in the future if you're going to pursue a political career?
Well, I don't intend to walk Harlem streets with white companions in the future.
Well, never? I mean,
if they come up, I won't be afraid to walk the streets with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the people know, you know, if you're in the community constantly, well, they know that you are one of them.
You mean to come back from Stanford Law when you graduate and all that and live on 145th Street or somewhere like that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
And just settle here with your wife and you probably have some kids by then. You don't have any yet.
No, I don't have any kids.
And you think that by virtue of that fact, because you're sort of bone and flesh of this neighborhood, you could do something to bridge the gap between leadership and the Negro masses. Go on.
There's one advantage that I have already. We have already, me and the community already have an unbroken communicability, which the community doesn't have with any other members of the Negro power structure.
Well, it's funny. I'd like to believe that, but you know, I grew up or came up in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn, where your friend KB in the book also grew up, and I guess I got out in the way that you got out of Harlem, though you don't want to stay out of Harlem. And I find, going back to the extent that I do, that it's not so much that they're alienated from me as that I'm alienated from them. It's nothing I chose. It's kind of happened.
Yeah, well, this is your individual. This is your individual problem,
right,
Norman.
But you don't think it happened to you?
And yeah, I don't think it will happen to me. As a matter of fact, I know it won't happen to me. It hasn't happened yet, and it isn't likely to happen because I have no desire. Now, had you stayed in the community, had you come right back once you had completed your education, yeah, you know, you could. And the community is all gone. That's another thing. Yeah. Well, my community is still here. Yeah,
still here.
And most of the people with whom I grew up are still here. We still know each other. We still have a going relationship, and we can. I have never really left Harlem.
Yeah.
You see, my parents still live here. I've been in Washington for the last 4 years, but I've never stayed out of Harlem for more than 2 months
at a time. You just keep coming back. You just keep coming back.
Oh, I'm still here. This is home. This is still my legal residence. I don't vote in Washington. I vote in New York City, right here. Yeah.
Tell me something else, Claude. You mentioned the riots in Los Angeles before. Did it surprise you at all when no riots occurred in Harlem or were triggered in Harlem after the Los Angeles riots? I know some people were scared that it might spread like an epidemic. Did it surprise
because
you?
Because nobody knew. You know, people... Look, everybody who are in authoritative positions are actually ignorant of what riots are all about, of why the people are out there in the streets. It's like this idiotic thing that Mayor Wagner did. And when we had the riot here in Harlem last summer, what does he do? Instead of, if he had any kind of courage, if he were a competent mayor, what he would have done was to have made a public announcement addressing the Harlem community and stating that he would be at a specified location at some future time in the near future, and he wanted all the disgruntled rioters to appear there and voice their grievances. This was the way. This was the way for him to deal with the problem.
You think that would have?
Yeah, but he acted like an idiot. He runs from. He goes down. He calls down south for Martin Luther King. Who the hell is Martin Luther King in Harlem? You mean that old Southern preacher who's always going around talking about peace, nonviolence, let Ku Klux Klansmen hit you over the head with sticks, hang you, or shoot you, and that. So nobody wants to hear that nonsense in Harlem. Harlem is not a passive community.
Right.
People are violent. They've known violence all their lives.
Yeah, right. Right. Well, how come if Wagner had said he was going to be there to listen to grievances, you think this would have stopped the riots cold if he had said that?
No, but it wouldn't have stopped the riots. I think it would have. It would have stopped them then and there, but providing he did more than just say that and more than just appear and forget about the people once he'd heard the grievances. And not only that, it would have served an even a more far-reaching purpose than simply to stop the riots right then and there. He would have built up a rapport between the Harlem communities throughout the city, such as, the Bedford-Stuyvesant area, and areas of the Bronx, and then Brownsville and Brooklyn, and there would have been a basis for future cooperation. There would have been no need for riots anymore.
So you think there's kind of rational causes for riots, is what you're implying? That's not
rational causes.
What is it? What is it?
Your
father called riots in the book?
Yeah, my father termed riots in the '43 riots when I was a little boy looking out of the window, thinking we had been invaded by the Germans or the Japs or something, and I asked him what was going on. My father said, "Oh, just a lot of niggas gone fool, And this was what a riot was supposed to be. But no, that has nothing to do with it. This is a riot. A riot is like the last resort, of the hopeless. Well, in Los Angeles, in those riots, the reason they couldn't find anybody to talk to those people is because they neglected them too long.
Well, they meaning both
the power structures, the white and
black.
The
white and black power structures. Well, it's a tricky question, this business of the riots. I don't know. It's been suggested.
It isn't tricky. It isn't tricky. It's because you have never looked at it before. Nobody's ever looked at it. And as long as we can quiet it down, nobody wants to look at it. The riots are a good thing. They had the best idea in Los Angeles that anybody's had about any of the ghettos yet. Burn it to the ground. There's nothing tricky about it.
Would you like Harlem burned to the ground?
That'd be a great idea.
To burn Harlem to the ground?
Yeah, to burn Harlem to the ground and rebuild it.
Well, not really burn it, but bulldoze it and rebuild it.
Yeah, just demolish it, whichever way you prefer.
Well, somebody suggested that one of the reasons that weren't any riots in Harlem was that the poverty program has been working this summer in Harlem. You think that's true? What do you think of the poverty program? Is it any good?
The poverty program has potential, but they aren't even near to fulfillment of the potential that the program has yet. For one thing, it wasn't thoroughly programmed before it got underway. And for another thing,
thought out carefully.
That's right. That's right. They figured, all we have to do is give them some money here. The people who will be the primary recipients of the poverty program are only destitute materially, and all they need is some money, and money will solve the entire problem. And this was a grand fallacy.
Well, I don't think that was the idea behind it, Claude. I think the idea, in fact, that if that were the idea, they just would have handed out money.
That's what they did.
They were trying to do. Well, they handed out money to a lot of social workers. They didn't hand any money out to the destitute. The notion of, training people for jobs, a thing like Operation Head Start to get little kids in nursery school early enough so that they can overcome whatever handicaps they may have by the time they get to school, things of that sort. I myself don't know exactly what to think of this. You think that on the whole it is a good idea, that some of these programs are working, or you think it's all public relations, slogans, fake?
No, I don't think it's all public relations. I don't think it's all slogans. And I think that the people behind it in authoritative positions are sincerely interested in elevating the people of the blighted areas economically, politically, and socially. But right now, the poverty program, it's all bogged down in a lot of statistics. It's actually a war on poverty, and it's being fought like a war. In the poverty program, one of the
it's fought as badly as wars are usually fought.
It's being carried out just like a military campaign. And the people are being neglected, for one thing. The people who are supposed to benefit by this. And another thing is that there's always the hang-up in a chain of command. And there's so many different agencies involved that in order to cooperate with these agencies and for future cooperation from the agencies, they have to many times neglect the people. And before they can iron all of this out. It's going to take at least 3 years before they even know what they're doing with the poverty program.
Yeah, you think it's mostly an administrative tangle, that is, but that the basic thrust of the program is a good one and could help.
Yeah, the idea behind it is beyond reproach. But it's just that it hasn't gotten underway yet.
Yeah, well, it's
really.
still
And
pretty new.
It still has a great deal of potential.
But has it done anything for morale in Harlem, as far as you can tell? I mean, is it...
Well, not yet. It hasn't gotten to the people yet. The poverty program has gotten no further than the Negro middle classes and all the Harlem throughout the nation.
Well, what about something like HARU Act? Would you say that's
HARU
true?
Act has got HARU Act. What they've done, they've gotten the middle class Negroes and given them money and given them jobs and positions and said, well, everything is all set up in Harlem. Now go out there and take care of the children. Yeah, but there's very little that can be done for the children in Harlem without doing something for the parents.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it's almost an actual antilogy to say, well, here's the money. We'll forget about the adults now and work on the edification of the younger generation that's coming up. These people live at home with their parents, these children, and everything that's done in HARU Act with the neglect of the parents will be undone almost immediately by the parents in the home. This is idiotic.
Well, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the home. The statistics, I know you hate statistics and you hate social science and all that sort of thing, but there's a certain crude truth in these reports. Recently, a report on the Negro family was made, as the so-called Moynihan report. It hasn't been made public yet, and one of the things it stresses is the very high rate of illegitimacy in Harlem. I don't know, something like 44% of all births last year. And it talks about the difficulty of kids growing up with an absent father, which of course was not your case. You did grow up with a family, a father and mother, and sisters and a brother. Just one brother, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you feel that this is a really crucial problem? I mean, from the way you look at it, say from the way you look at it as a Harlem kid, or do you think that this sort of analysis is misguided? And
tell me something. Why do you think that various government, city and federal government agencies are always so anxious to come up with a report? You know, the people in Harlem don't need any reports.
What do they need?
The people in Harlem need people who are sincerely interested in them as members of the power structure. What they need is genuine representation.
Right.
And this is something which they don't have.
Yeah, but how do they get it? That's we started talking about that before. How do they get it?
How do they get it? They get it by the power structure, the administration.
Which power structure are you talking about now?
The general from the Harlem power structure on up. You know, throughout to the top, the federal power structure.
All right.
Yeah.
The White House on down.
Yeah, just go here and study the communities themselves. Don't sit around and give something to some psychologist who knows less about it than they do, actually. He's been sleeping in a book all of his life. They're going to give it to him and say, yeah, tell me about those Negroes. And all he gets is a psychological report that says nothing.
Well, nevertheless, it says something when you're talking about Harlem and you're wondering, for example...
I'll tell you what it says, Norman. You know what it says? It says, well, here is the most recent word on the Negro community. And now you can take this and mull over it for another couple years and forget the Negro until that time. That's all it has said. That's all it says today.
You think it's this kind of evasive action? Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Yeah, I wouldn't agree with that, because a lot of these reports are precisely what triggered actions like the War on Poverty, which are, by your own account, valuable, though they haven't really got off the ground yet.
I think recent riots and disturbances in Negro communities have had a much more pronounced influence on the War on Poverty program
I would grant you that.
any kind of report.
Yeah, sure, I would grant you that, except that this is the way the bureaucracies work. I mean, they've got to get the facts and the figures, and before they can decide on specific programs.
Don't get any reports. Get the people. Bring the people into the Senate committee hearings. Bring them into congressional hearings. The people from the community. Don't bring any kind of psychological reports, any kind of sociological reports. They aren't even. These things aren't. It's all theory. They don't even approach the people. As a matter of fact, they tend to they tend to make the people even less of people. Here's just a mass problem, that's all.
Well, yeah, I know that.
And I don't think they really educate any administrators who are sincerely interested in the communities.
Well, you still, though, haven't answered my question, the one I started with, which is, do you think that this business of illegitimacy, of large numbers of illegitimate kids
is no big problem, really.
Why not?
Because people will, look, you give people nothing materially, nothing spiritually. Well, what have they got? They've got instincts and urge. Sex is the most natural thing in the world.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's not a big problem.
Yeah, it's not a problem here that the community isn't that concerned about it. If they're so concerned about you know what you're saying, actually.
Well, I'm asking. I'm not saying.
You're saying
not yet,
now,
anyway.
wouldn't it be nice if we could get the Negroes to accept what little they have in the ghettos throughout the nation and still not have too many illegitimate children?
Oh, I'm not saying that at all.
Why should the Negroes who've been so deprived in this country for so long worry about the power structures disturbance over their high rate of illegitimacy?
Nobody is suggesting that they ought to worry about the power structures disturbance. The question is whether this is a factor.
That's not the problem. It's merely a symptom of the overall problem. Illegitimacy, drug addiction.
Right.
Why doesn't anybody say anything about drug addiction?
Yeah, let's talk about drugs.
Yeah.
In the book, drugs are the villain in your book. You say when about 1955 it swept Harlem like a plague, and you, thank God, escaped from it. Why do you think drugs took over in the way they did all of a sudden?
You see, my generation was in almost total rebellion. They were rebelling against the previous generation, our parents. We were rebelling against the power structure. We were rebelling against the adult world. We were rebelling against almost everything, all forms of authority. And it's like drugs came at a time when it gave some substance to our rebellion. If we wanted to say that we were different from our parents who had come from the South and who were happy to work in Goldberg's house and scrub his floors and work downtown for $40 and $50 a week and think they're doing good, it's like, well, how could we show that we were so different? We were living in the same houses with them. We were accepting the same social and economic conditions as they were accepting. So what made us so different? Well, I'll tell you, one of the most prominent features of our behavior that distinguished us from our parents was the fact that in 1950, when drugs began to pour into Harlem, we went to drugs. We used drugs. We got high off heroin. We nodded, but we were cool. We didn't do like our parents had been doing since the plantation days, getting drunk on Saturday night and going around cutting each other up, hitting each other in the head with axes and meat cleavers and shooting each other. All we did, we got high and we nodded and we became lost in our own selves.
You weren't violent.
And this was
a
a distinguishing feature. That's right. Yeah. It was part of the rebellion.
Yeah. And it was a rebellion, in this case, against violence.
No,
partly.
Not so much against violence. Violence was merely a single aspect of our parents' behavior, and it was a rebellion against being identified with our parents.
Them,
also in the book, I went on to say that the reason my generation had so much difficulty in the American society of my time was because Goldberg had never seen us. He would say things like to us that had been said of our fathers without them ever feeling any kind of resentment and hostility, and we were ready to kill him. And when he said, "Boy, and do you know some girl, and there's a girl working in my house who helps my wife who's 25 years old, and this girl is a decrepit old Negro woman who's about 60 years old," and we resented this, and we wanted to show him, look, we are not those girls, we are not those boys, this is a brand new nigger here. You know?
And you were showing that to Goldberg?
Yeah, to the entire white society.
Yeah. To the entire white society. But you yourself always knew that drugs was bad business. You escaped it from the beginning, and you always knew it was the worst kind of thing. You think that the legalization...
I didn't always know this was the worst kind of thing. I would have been a drug addict had I not had such a traumatic experience
the first time.
in my first attempt at getting high off drugs. Well, I thought I was going to die, and so I never went on. But the other two people who tried it with me for the first time, they went on to become drug addicts. And a majority of many people who tried it for the first time, even though they got sick, almost deathly sick, they still went on to become drug addicts.
Yeah. Do you think that the legalization of drugs would help significantly in this problem? You think drugs is the big problem of Harlem, don't you?
No,
really?
I don't think.
Or the big symptom, okay?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think the legalization of drugs would help drug addiction any, but it would help to alleviate many of the detrimental and and terribly destructive ramifications of drug addiction. It's like if drug addicts didn't have to go around sticking up people, breaking into people's homes, there'd be much less violence associated with drug addiction.
Sure.
Yeah, and this, in my opinion, would be one of the primary reasons for legalizing drugs.
Mm-hmm. And it would. What about? Do you think legalization would not really help in getting people off drugs and in kicking them?
It would help some of them because many of the people who would perhaps not getting off, but I'm certain it would prevent many people from becoming drug addicts, especially kids, you know, 13, 14, and 15. Drugs, or the use of drugs, has a sort of romantic appeal to kids. Like they want to, there's something mature about it. If you want to be older, well, you do what the older guys are doing. The older guys are using drugs. They're nodding and they're talking with heavy drags in their voices. You know, like, yeah, baby, and this. Every kid wants to be grown.
Yeah, it's cool. It's big. It's grown up. Same reason kids start smoking cigarettes too.
That's right.
Yeah. What else do you think, Claude? Given all the enormous complexity of the situation, especially as the situation has to be viewed by somebody like you who's in it, who came up in it and is going to stay in it, stay in the community, what sort of thing do you think you or maybe there's some other people like you could really do? This kind of troubles me a little bit. If you were by magic wand, I made you the congressman from this district tomorrow, granted that it would improve the morale of the people.
I would tell you, but I can't because I'm afraid somebody is liable to steal my campaign, my platform. Yeah.
You're saving it for about 8 years.
Yeah.
Well, could you give us a little bit of a hint?
Oh, look, you can look all around you. Tell me, what do you think this community is in need of? Just take a look in any direction you choose.
Well, I know what this community is in need of. It's in need of
a myriad of things.
Yeah,
Well,
so we know. Better housing, better jobs, and so on. But how can the fact that there's, say, one really great congressman from Harlem or from the Watts district in Los Angeles, you really think that this could, by itself, help?
It could help because
things?
one good congressman is going to attract other good people to his aid.
Mm-hmm.
And the other good people are going to attract others. And then we'll have, you know, a conglomeration of people who are genuinely interested and also qualified in the community, working within the community and doing things for the community. You see, the Harlem community is neglected in all the furor about Negro maltreatment and Negro bitterness. Like you have now our two most vocal exponents, the Negroes' two most vocal exponents, don't live in Harlem, have never lived in Harlem.
What do you mean?
You take Leroy Jones, James Baldwin. These guys don't live in Harlem.
Well, Baldwin is from Harlem.
Baldwin is from Harlem, yeah, in a way, yeah. Jones is not from Harlem. Jones lives very happily in Greenwich Village. I don't even know what a Greenwich Village Negro is. I've never written about the Greenwich Village Negro. I've written about the Harlem Negro throughout. To me, the Greenwich Village Negro isn't even a Negro. If he were a Negro, he'd be up here in Harlem.
Well, you lived in the village for a while.
Yeah, because I was curious. I had to see what's down in Greenwich Village for a Negro, and I found out nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah.
You're just deracinated and unhappy, and well, that
you can hide if you want to.
Yeah.
But if you're going to hide down in Greenwich Village, don't be making all that noise about how black you are, you know, and how indignant you are about the abuse of the black man.
And making all the whites applaud you when you say how awful they are and how monstrous they are. Well, Claude, some of what you say sort of implies that you're not terribly concerned about the idea or the ideal of integration. Is that true? I mean, that is, do you look forward to a time when whites and Negroes will be living side by side together everywhere with no regard for color, or do you think that that's a less important goal?
Norman, to be realistic, when speaking about integration, look, there's alienation even within ethnic groups. There's
sure
discrimination within ethnic groups. You can't tell some guy who doesn't like drinking you know, and who doesn't like violence, to live next door to a guy who's always getting drunk and beating up his wife. Like, it's the same thing. You can't tell a Negro, like, look, there's some nice white people around, go and live with them, or there's some nice Negroes, go and live with them. I don't think this is really important. If you treated Negroes as fairly as whites were treated in the country, the power structure treated them, that is, there would be no clamor for integration. I don't think Negroes are too anxious to live among white people. They would just like to have the freedom to live wherever they chose.
Yeah, and live in better conditions.
Yeah, that's all people need.
Well, you think it's been a mistake then of the civil rights movement to
No, it
use
hasn't.
integration
It hasn't. And they've had a very valid purpose for advocating integration. It appeared for a long time, and it still does to a great extent, that the power structure was never going to give the Negro communities throughout the country anything, you know, separately. So the Negro leadership began to advocate, well, let's integrate, let's get in there together. If we get in with the white people, then it would be very difficult for them, for the power structure, to cheat us out of what is rightfully ours and what they're giving to the whites.
So you think it was tactically a good idea, but not really ideologically?
No, it's a little far-fetched.
Is there any particular branch of the civil rights movement or any particular organization you think more highly of than the others? I gather you're not so hot for the NAACP or the Urban League. Are you enthusiastic about SNCC, for example?
Yeah, I am very enthusiastic about SNCC, about the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. I've worked with them a little, and
Better hold it for a minute. That plane is making some noise. It's the trouble with being outdoors. Yeah. It's a prop plane for a change. Yeah, I'm sorry. You say you're enthusiastic about Mississippi.
SNCC and about CORE and the Freedom Democratic Party in Mississippi. I believe in what these people are doing wholeheartedly, and within those branches of the civil rights movement, I've met the most sincere people. I mean, people who are truly dedicated to the cause, to what they're doing, and to what they want, more so than any of the other groups. Now, the NAACP, the Urban League, the United Negro College Front, these people, I've never been able to identify with them. You know, I've always been a sort of low-class Negro from the Harlem streets, and they've never meant anything to me. And this was fine with them, and it was and is fine with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in my opinion, they've done very little for the Negro. The Negro class to which I belong.
Yeah. Well, you think that SNCC, of course, is not. What about CORE? I mean, are they doing something for the class to which you belong? You
CORE?
think? Yeah.
Yeah, CORE.
Well, SNCC operates in the South, of course.
Yeah, and CORE operates at the grassroots. You know, CORE is very active in rent strikes, this sort of thing, and getting people out of jail when they've been abused by fighting police brutality on local levels.
Yeah.
In places like Harlem, where there is a lot of this sort of thing.
Plane. A lot of planes flying over Harlem too. There she goes. Anyway, but I take it that your own ambitions are not so much to work within the civil rights movement, which is in a sense outside the ordinary political process. You want to work right smack within the political process. You think you're going to make it?
I hope I'm going to make it, and well, I have a lot of confidence in myself. Perhaps it's all pomp and arrogance, but still, it's hard for me to conceive of myself not making it.
Well, you made it. You made it this far, and you needed an enormous amount of confidence and leadership and intelligence and imagination. Chances are you will. But you know, there's a sort of discrepancy between the way you've been talking, Claude, and the impression I got from the book, which, if you like, is a detached, analytic one. The impression I got from the book is that you had, and I've read it twice, there's virtually no feeling of bitterness on your part toward the white world expressed in the book. You talk about other people's feelings, but I certainly got no impression. And again, it's one of the unusual qualities of the book for this particular period. While you were talking before, I sensed a certain kind of anger in you and a certain kind of bitterness. Have you changed since the book was written, or am I wrong in my reading of the book?
No. You see, I was bitter. It's natural for any Negro to be bitter towards the white society. But as I was coming up, I was releasing all of my bitterness throughout my childhood. That's what my delinquent activities were all about. You know, it was a rebellion.
It was more
And at the
rebellion
same
against
time,
your parents than
but
against
this
the
is closely,
whites, wasn't it?
No, against, I stole very little from my parents. They had very little to steal.
Yeah.
I stole more from the white society.
I mean, you
believe
were
me.
rebelling against the down home.
I told you, we were
thing.
rebelling against everything.
Everything.
You know, that's right. You know, from the top on down. Now, what you just said about my lack of bitterness, it's like I can't go around. I could never become a black chauvinist because I've been well helped along the way, you know, immensely by white people. It's hard for somebody, like if you're laying down on the ground dying, you know, and some Negro has stabbed you and laid you down there and left you to be, and a lot of other Negroes come by and watch you, you know, and step over you or step on you on the way, and some white man comes and picks you up. How do you say, oh, that no good white man, let me kill him? You've got to be a madman. Yeah, so what do you get the bitterness for? I've been too closely related.
Tell me something else. Yeah, speaking of your relation to the white world, why'd you dedicate the book to Wiltwick, to the Wiltwick School?
Because
Tell me something about the school.
Well, Wiltwick is a non-denominational therapeutic institution for delinquent boys from the ages of 8. They accept boys from the ages of 8 to 11, and they usually stay there, or at the time when I was there, they were staying anywhere from 18 months to 4 or 5 years.
Then there was that crazy gray-haired lady you talked about in the book, turned out to be Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah.
She was the
founder.
Yeah.
Eleanor Roosevelt, Justine Wise Polier, and Marshall Field were the founders of Wiltwick School for Boys. And Wiltwick was the place. At Wiltwick, I met the first people I was close to and living with, the first college grads I'd ever known at Wiltwick.
The counselors.
That's right, and this made quite an impression on me also. You know, they would tell me about their child, their adolescent experiences in college, and for the first time, to me, this seemed realistic. You know, you could sit and listen at night.
Made it seem possible.
Yeah, and you'd say, man, that might have been fun. You know, maybe I'll try it someday. Yeah.
Well, at that age, you tried someday as a kick.
Yeah.
But it did have a profound impression on you.
Yeah, but not only that, these were people with whom I could identify with.
Yeah.
You know, since the vast majority of them were Negroes. I could say, well, yeah, I could go to college too. They went.
Yeah, and so you finally did.
That's right.
At the age of 21.
Yeah.
Well, Claude, it's been great talking to you, and I don't know. I'm one of those cold, detached intellectuals, but I think I'm beginning to get some kind of sense of what you're talking about. Though I must say I got more powerful sense of it from reading your book than even from sitting around here. And all I can say is that in about 4 or 8 years, I hope we're going to be seeing you as Congressman Brown.
I hope so too, Norm.
Right.
It's been fun.
Step back there now.